This is internationally best-selling indie author Michael Brent Collings inviting you to join me at bestsellerlife.com/DCR to unlock my tips, tricks, and hacks for a successful writing career. So go to bestsellerlife.com/DCR and kickstart your writing adventure today.
This is Daniel.
And this is Krebs.
This is Alton.
And I am Matai.
And you're listening to Dungeon Crawlers Radio, the greatest geek podcast out there. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio, where we are here with a wonderful special guest from out in the universe. We have discovered a sound wizard, the man, the myth, the legend, Jordan Rannells. We discovered Jordan, who has some really amazing audio tracks. There's nothing more amazing than music. We've had many conversations on past episodes where we've talked about how music can define a scene in a movie, and how just changing a simple song or the tone of a song just changes the entire dynamic, where if you add just the right tone, the right music, it can take something that doesn't look very scary, and then you turn down the lights and you play the right music. You're now totally on board with the scene. The mind is set. So, Jordan, thanks for coming on the show and being a part of our discussion this evening.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat about my projects and geek out with you guys for a little bit.
Yeah, so first off, where did this idea come from? Because, I doubt it was just like, lightning bolt flashed through the sky and suddenly it's like, man, this is what I need to do. But maybe it is as simple as that, lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, the idea really comes from me spending many years loving film music, loving the making of the film music and what goes into that kind of thing, and then also loving audiobooks and thinking of audiobooks as this extended version of the movies, right? Mm-hmm. So when I saw the Lord of the Rings movies and then I started reading the books, I was like, wow, this is like an extended version of, of those movies that are already ridiculously long. So my idea came from, what if we could have film-level sound design, film-level music for the entire story of the audiobook? And what are the applications that you could use that experience for? So my project is a full immersive audio experience mixed like it was a movie for the entirety of fantasy books like The Lord of the Rings that I've already completed, The Wheel of Time, starting work on a Game of Thrones and even more. And it's really exciting because there's multiple ways that you can experience it. You can take the audio that I've crafted, so individual sound effects for every scene, music composed for every scene, nature environments that I've gone outside and recorded myself for every scene. It transitions exactly like a movie would. And you can pair that with an audiobook and get this full movie in your ears type experience. But the fun of it is that you can also listen to it without the narration, and you can use it for D&D nights. You can use it for, just listening to an audio version of these stories that we love. And you can read out loud while it's playing. I know some families that have done that together. And there's just a lot of really fun applications that we can use this project for.
This is utterly fascinating to me. I got a chance to listen to some of your samples and to see some of your exemplary videos about how this all works and how you come up with the... first of all, for the folks at home who understand the difference, Jordan does not just simply work in monaural or stereo, but actually works in spatial audio, in 3D audio. And it has a genuine environmental impact on your experience as a participant. I have an amateur filmmaking background I used to be a film student once upon a time, and I still do acting on the side sometimes, but I love beautiful, solid soundtracks. Audio is so important to every one of these major media endeavors. One question I have for you is, people read at different speeds, and you say that you have music for every one of these scenes in the book, and that it transitions from one scene to the next. But I know that I'm a slow reader, and it might take me longer to get through a scene or a sequence than it might take somebody else. How do you handle that with your tracks?
Great question. And really one of the first questions that most people ask when they hear about this kind of project. So when I first designed the work, we'll take Lord of the Rings as an example, because that was the first project that I did. When I was writing the music, putting the sound effects in, all of that stuff, I was doing it to match Andy Serkis's audiobook performance.
Ah,
Nice.
So what that means is everything lines up perfectly. If you want to sync it later with your copy of the audiobook, you can do that easily. But if you're reading with it, and I've tested this with a bunch of different readers and people that also say that they read slowly, and I read slowly. So through a bunch of tests, I've noticed that even if you read slowly, you don't read as slowly as someone performing it, like Andy does. It's very difficult to actually read it that slowly. And so what happens is, in every example that I've tested this with, you always end up, if your reading speed is off a little bit, then you might get ahead a little bit. And that's really easy to adjust for, because if you're reading and you get to a part where a door opens or something like that, and you haven't heard it yet, then you just hang on, listen to the experience for a little bit. You'll hear the door open, and then you can continue on your way reading. So in all of the testing that I've done, that hasn't really been an issue, because he's really performing it, and he's really going slow with it. So the timing works out pretty well.
See, and I have the opposite problem where I read really fast. And so it's like, I'm going to have to slow down to enjoy, which is not a problem. I mean, I love audiobooks, and I definitely don't read as slow as audiobooks go, but I enjoy the experience, especially the graphic audio versions that are out there, where it is kind of that full immersive movie in your mind, as they call it, where you have a full cast, you have the background noises, you have the music and everything that goes along with it, and there's just something really enjoyable where you can just lay there, close your eyes, and let that story unravel. So for me, where I read really fast, it's going to be a joy, because let's face it, reading Lord of the Rings, I love it, but man, there's a lot in there, and to be able to slow down and hear these things, I think it kind of adds another level to that, because like you said, the movies were so successful because we could finally visualize it. And when you bring in music and the sound components, like you're saying, like a door opening, I think that brings more and allows us to let go of the really crazy, heavy English language that's in those books and enjoy the experience more.
Yeah, and I think that the important part to talk about here, too, is that graphic audio productions are probably the closest, or radio dramas are the closest to what this experience is. But the key and kind of why I wanted to do it the way that I did is that there's nothing missing. It's not abridged. There's no missing part of the story. It's very interesting for me, because I'm restrained in a way to exactly what it is. I don't get to add space. I don't get to, remove parts. I have to do exactly what it is. And so, that means putting in footsteps for everything. It means putting in, if there's the Ride of the Rohirrim and there's, a whole huge army of horses in there, I got to put all of those in there and make it work. And it's really an exciting way to work through it, for sure.
And that brings up an important sound engineer question, which is, especially someone who might be more amateur at this, their first inclination is going to be, I must have full fidelity for every sound that's present. If there's 100 horses, I got to have 100 horses, or I got to make it sound like 100 horses, And if there's 1,000 orcs, I got to have 1,000 orcs. But in truth, sound engineers find ways to make the feeling accurate without necessarily having to put in every sound. How do you go through the process of deciding what sound needs to be present versus which sounds we actually subtract and allow the reader to inject?
Totally. Great question. And that's where all of these projects begin. I outline every chapter of each audiobook. So I go through and I say, what would be there? What would the characters hear? What would their perspective be? What would the distance be? All of this research to get as much detail as I could. Then I put those sounds in as if it was really there, right? Like if we're in Minas Tirith in Lord of the Rings up at the top of the tower, the wind would be crazy up there. So I want to have all of that detail in there, and then I can start to decide, okay, maybe I pull it down a little bit so that the music can come up here, or maybe I focus on this little element a little bit instead of, the loud, crazy loud sound of the battle. I actually had, it's funny that you mentioned the horses, because when I was working on Lord of the Rings, I did a little talk with a military historian named Brett Devereaux, and we talked about what would the horses sound like, what kind of armor would they be wearing, and what sounds would that make. And if you did hear that many horses, it would be deafeningly loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how, like you said, how close do you get it with accuracy versus, it being something that we can actually listen to? And I always start with what would the characters hear, and then try and work into what works, in an audio experience type of thing. So a lot of those layers, I have probably well over 200 tracks for some of those Lord of the Rings chapters, because they're that complex.
Yeah.
But then it's just a matter of like what gets the focus, just like in a movie, what would get focus. But the tricky part with it is that the tricky part and the fun of it is that I don't have to worry about the visual, right? So I kind of have a little bit more freedom with that.
Truly. And so one thing I'm curious about is, especially with the Lord of the Rings project, and we're gonna switch focus in just a moment, but with the Lord of the Rings project, was there a particular sound? Actually, I want to focus on that. What sound effect did you find exactly the right secret sauce for, where you're like, oh, this is perfect, I'm proud of this moment?
One of the most fun moments that every time I listen to it, it makes me smile, is there's a chapter that happens in the movies as well. So if you've only watched the movies, you'll know, where they're in their boats and they're headed down the river after they leave Lothlorien. And I went out in my wooden canoe with my 3D microphone and put it in the canoe and canoed myself around in a local park here for a couple hours, and I put that in there, and it sounds exactly like you're in the canoe with the Fellowship on the way down the river. That's and amazing. It is just such a fun experience to listen to, because I remember what that moment was like for me, and I think it really nailed it. But I have plenty of music moments like that too that I love. I got to write music for characters that don't exist in the movies, so we don't have anything to go off of for them. But yeah, there's tons of little things. The Treebeard chapter is like 2 hours of audio long on its own. So there's a lot of fun things.
And was there a particular sound that gave you a lot of difficulty to figure out?
One of the challenging ones is in the scene where Grond, this huge battering ram, hits the walls of Minas Tirith and it bursts open. That was an interesting challenge, because it had to be really loud, and it's really on the edge of how loud can I make it. But it had to have metallic sounds. It had to have kind of explosive sounds, but it's not an explosion.
Yeah.
You know? So that was a lot of work. But really the thing that is the most challenging is the big battle scenes that have all these details that I have to then try and figure out how to balance well and you know, make it feel huge in your ears without the visual aspect telling you that it's huge, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of fun.
No, it's always amazing to me, you know, when you go back and see like documentaries and stuff like that, where they talk about the sound engineering and how you hear the sound behind the sound, you know. I just recently watched one about, you know, the Battle of Hoth on Empire Strike Back, and the sounds they used for the AT-ATs to be walking across, you know, the ice and the snow. And you like, really? They chose those things? But that really is what gave that sound and that life to that, you know. And then you go back to the Lord of the Rings movies and what they chose to make specific sounds. You wouldn't have thought, like, you know, when someone's slapping, it's, you know, it's a like a sirloin steak that they're slapping against a tarp or something, you know, and that's a fist punch, and you're like, it's amazing the different types of sounds that sound engineers can produce to make it sound like that moment is happening, when reality is that's not what they did. They didn't just walk up to someone and slug them, you know, or you know, the sound of horses. Yeah, maybe you went out and found some horses that were neighing and running at full pace, but that probably isn't likely, because, you know, you'd have to sit on a horse like you're on your kayak. But it is amazing the types of sounds you can create from these everyday things. You know, and I like the fact that you're like, okay, well, you know, they're going down a river. I'm just going to go jump on a kayak and bring my thing. That
Exactly.
makes sense. And it's fascinating that you've been able to do this. And what's even more fascinating is you are focused on, okay, even though there's this massive battle going on or these events, what are the things that I need to key in on? Because you know, they're not just going to be hearing the constant din of the fight. When we're up on top of Minas Tirith, like you said, there's going to be wind. You know, maybe there's the crackle of fire from the torch, or whatever that moment is. You're really keying on the journey and the entertainment wow of that moment in that scene, which is fantastic.
And over my shoulder, for those who are able to see the video when one day we release that, I actually have lined up a bunch of my Lord of the Rings games. And I have, these are not all of them, but I have no less than 6 specific games, each one with some number of expansions. And then, of course, I have the tabletop role-playing game that nobody will play with me, and so on.
What? Seriously? You've never asked me.
Yeah, you've got a good point there. I should have asked you by now. But
Yes.
Point is, the music that you've created, the soundscapes that you've created, were, of course, with the audiobook in mind. Do these also work well, or can they work well with a game setting?
Totally. And one of the most exciting ways about how I created this project is, you know, when people get their hands on the soundscape, they get different mixes of it. So there's the full mix that has sound effects and music and Foley and everything. But you can also listen to just the music, or you can listen to just the ambience. So if you wanted to, you know, if you wanted a kind of a creepy scene, you could put on the Shelob's Lair chapter where you're in the caves of the spider, and, you know, that could be perfect for a scene. And then you could swap it to the Shire if you're, you know, looking for something a little bit more nice and friendly. So people have definitely done that before with the soundscape.
So you've got basically, for every track, there's 3 versions. There's the combined version, the music only, and the Foley or the ambient sound only.
Yep, exactly.
That is awesome. I didn't know that.
Man, it
Yeah.
sounds like I need some new tracks for writing.
I know, right?
Just have that going while I'm writing. Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, the great thing of it, you know, just talking about Lord of the Rings, and I've done The Hobbit, I've done The Silmarillion, I've done the first 2 books of The Wheel of Time, and just talking about the Lord of the Rings, that's 63 hours worth of content just for that. Wheel of Time will be 450 when it's finished eventually. But, you know, like I said, the Treebeard chapter is 2 hours long. You know, you could put just that chapter on and have, you know, a pretty thorough amount of time for your game with that on. I've also had people that will turn all of the sounds off in Lord of the Rings Online and play the soundscape instead while they're playing, which is kind of fun. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and you've kind of hit on something that I've got so many questions about this, because of course I'm thinking about this in like a filmmaking manner or like in a showman's manner. But so you touched on Wheel of Time there for a second, and I'm glad that you did, because I did want to talk about that. Wheel of Time is an Herculean undertaking. It's 14 books if you don't include the prequel, and
which I will.
Which you will, and you should. One question I have is, you know, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Wheel of Time, in each of these disparate IPs, do you find that you are reprising themes and that you are taking variations on character-driven orchestrations, so that, you know, Frodo at one point, you know, in the beginning, he is this optimistic, unstoppable, charming force, and by the end of the film, he's corrupted, he's tainted, he's a shell of who he used to be, you know, when we get to the climax, I should say. So do you find that you're taking like variations on themes and doing reprisals and things like that?
Absolutely. It's a big conversation, and I'll try not to go on too long. But, you know, Samwise Gamgee has 6 different versions of his theme. Aragorn has 5 or 6 different versions of his theme. Those all developed. There's well over 100 for The Lord of the Rings that are then extended out to The Hobbit, you know, kind of worked backwards in The Hobbit. And then, you know, elven themes that are worked even further backwards into the Silmarillion. So all of that stuff is thought out and written with that intent. You know, if we're talking Wheel of Time again, I won't go into spoiler stuff, but for the main characters, I've written the final version of their arcs. I took those moments and wrote music for that moment. And then I went back, you know, a dozen books in some cases to the beginning and started with a simplified version of it that I will then, you know, aim towards the final version that I've already written. So that's all just the fun of it. It's so fun to do that kind of thing. Now, one of the most enjoyable aspects about it is that, you know, I'm working on a Game of Thrones, and the way that I'm scoring that is totally different, because there are some themes, but they're not character themes. They're more, you know, feelings like honor or despair and things like that. It's not character focused in the same way. So the way that I'm writing it is different, and it makes a whole different experience. When I get into, I've started just a little bit of work on The Expanse. That's going to be a totally different thing.
Oh wow,
and,
The Expanse.
You know, the way that they're approached is so different, and it really makes for a fun experience. You know, where with the Silmarillion, because it's this big kind of epic tale, it's a lot more music focused, whereas something like The Hobbit, which is really up close, is a lot more sound effects, a lot more Foley, and a little bit less music. So all of that kind of is brought into the mix. And when we're talking Wheel of Time, you know, certain characters have better perception than other characters. So they would hear more than other characters, which means the sound effects and the Foley would be more articulate for them compared to other characters. So it's very everything like that is such a fun little game for me to think about and try and figure out how I'm going to address it. In the Wheel of Time, there's two halves of the power. And you can only, there's rules for who can perceive that power based off of if you're a male or if you're a female, who can perceive what. And so that is part of my sound design, like if a female is channeling and we're in a male perspective, they're not going to hear it. We're not going to have that sound design, right? So it's really fun games to play around with and see what you get.
Can I just say thank you? Thank you for actually doing Wheel of Time correctly, unlike Amazon.
Yes, Wheel of Time, Amazon Prime does not exist.
Such a bitter disappointment. But you got the themes right. If it's in a male perspective and one of the female characters is channeling, they're not going to pick up on that, and vice versa. They muddled that. They muddled it. But, yeah.
There's a lot of thought that I've put into, okay, whose perspective are we in? And then you get extensions of that where you really need to have read the whole thing to know, what's being done in this moment.
Yeah.
Even if the character doesn't know what it is, I have to know what it is so that the sound matches. When it's explained in 4 books, I have to know what the deal is. And, I have character themes that are joint together that won't, you'll never hear them together for books and books, all that kind of stuff. And the creature design for Wheel of Time has been really fun, coming up with what a Grom sounds like and using like really pitched down frogs to get this kind of weird sound, making sound design for, other worlds and things like that. It's really a lot of fun.
I mean, what I'm ultimately hearing is you are an author. You're connecting everything just like an author would, but instead of using words, you're using music that conveys your story, and you're using sound effects in that, which is your unique story, but it's leveling these books up to, in a way that makes it entertaining. I think, unfortunately, a lot of us have lost the art of reading a book. Most people now, because of time schedule and stuff like that, we're more accustomed to listening to an audiobook than sitting down and flipping through pages. Long time ago, once upon a time ago, when it came to watching our favorite cartoons or shows, we had to wait week to week to week to watch something. Now it's force-fed to us, so much so that, they just dropped the first 4 episodes of Stranger Things, but they've broken it up so people don't, eat all of it at once. So because of this, we expect things on demand immediately, and I think what this does by introducing, and this is my opinion, that by introducing this music and this pacing, it forces us to slow down. It forces us to enjoy the story, to become part of the story, just as if we were wandering out of the Shire with Frodo, and heading towards Rivendell, or running away from Shelob, or whatever the thing is, or being a part of the adventure that's happening in Wheel of Time. Some of my favorite early audiobooks was the audiobook for Dragonlance, and Peter McNichol was the talent behind that one. It's only found on cassette tape, and I still have them.
Oh my gosh.
But even though I had read those books so much, they're the only books I own where the spine is broken. Listening to those audiobooks and the music and the performance put into those required me to slow down, and I found so many more details and minute things that I missed because of my reading style. I've always just been a fast reader. And so I think because of this is a wonderful opportunity for listeners to go out and read these books in a different way that require them to slow down and pick up details they may have never seen in the movie because it wasn't in there, or maybe it was zipped by so quickly. Fall in love with new moments in those books because now it's not just words on a page. You've added this element that connects them. Because, I mean, that's ultimately what music does. It invokes an emotion. And when we have that emotion, we connect to something in a very strong physical way. And when that music ties us to words that we're reading or hearing from a narrator, I mean, especially Andy Serkis does a fantastic job in those.
Oh, yeah.
Those moments become ingrained in us, and it's something we'll never forget. And I am excited. I'm excited to reread these stories with the music that you've added.
Oh, same. I'm super duper looking forward to like experiencing this. I'm going to admit something. It's going to damage my nerd card. I have never actually read the Lord of the Rings cover to cover. I've read portions of it and mostly the Fellowship. I had the intent to read it all, and then my copy was lost, and then I had to reacquire. It's this whole thing, but the point is, I've never read Lord of the Rings. I've never read The Hobbit. I've never read The Silmarillion. I'm only partway through the first half of the Wheel of Time series. So for me, this is an opportunity to have a unique first-time experience, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Now I want Jordan to do Dragonlance, or like the Drizzt series.
Oh, yeah.
Drizzt would be amazing.
Talked about that's a lot of books, though.
We should introduce you to our friend Bob Salvatore.
Yes.
There's this is maybe a good chance to mention, how do I create these? Like, how do I get the time to put this detail into it? And for the first, I think about 3 years ago, I did a Kickstarter. And that was for the Lord of the Rings, and it went really well. It was amazing. Spent 1.5 years creating Lord of the Rings. Then I did a follow-up for The Hobbit and the Silmarillion. That also succeeded, and then after that I did Wheel of Time, a second Wheel of Time, etc. So those Kickstarters were a huge way to let me spend all this time thinking about these things, designing these things, putting the time in. And that if listeners check out my website, you'll see that there's quite a lot of pre-orders on there that people can check out, and all of those pre-orders are basically a way to allow me the time to keep working on these, to put the time in, to put these this effort in. That's awesome.
Now, yeah, that is. Now, you did mention your website, so if you wouldn't mind, can you share that with our listeners so they can find it?
For sure. My website is jordanrannells.com, and I can maybe not spell it out, but we'll put it in the show notes, hopefully.
Yep, we will.
I can spell it if you want. So all of the soundscapes are on there. There's plenty of samples for you to listen to. There's a syncing app, which is really important to mention. You obviously don't get the audiobook with the soundscape. That is not how that works. You have to have the audiobook on your own. But my app will put your files and my files together really easily, and then you have a new set that you can listen to and enjoy. So that's super easy. All of the pre-orders are on there. You can get Lord of the Rings. You can get any of the other things that we've talked about. And I'm always around if people have questions. So lots of ways to listen for sure. And we do have a discount code that's probably good to mention as well.
Yeah, the discount code is RWR25. RWR25. If you use that code on jordanrannells.com, you will get 25% off your purchase. Now, just to be clear, is that 25% off the entire purchase, or is it off of a single item in the purchase?
Off of your whole order, the whole deal.
And look.
So that just means buy more stuff, you get more off.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trying to steal your money or anything, but I am curious. Can the same account use the code more than once?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so everybody go to jordanrannells.com and get 25% off of everything all the time. And definitely support this amazing artist. Did you say it was 68 hours of Lord of the Rings?
63 hours for Lord of the Rings.
63.
Plus about 20 hours for the Silmarillion, and I think 9 or 10 hours for the Hobbit.
Thanks. I mean, thanks for doing this. A lot of people probably wouldn't think of how different a story is with music. And, because we just experience it. It just happens from day to day. But when you add it, and it's unique, and it's different, and it just changes up the story. And like I've already said, it adds an element of emotion that ties you to that. Like you said, you love the Treebird chapter, you love the Tom Bombadil, and you really put those sounds and those emotions into that. Mm-hmm. And now there's going to be a plethora of other people out there that are going to enjoy those chapters just as much as you because of the love you've put into there. So thank you. We're really excited. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listeners, help out. This is going to be an amazing experience for you to relive these stories in a different way. And not only that, make Jordan's dream of continuing to do this for every book out there. Yes, every book out there.
Every book.
And just let this dream thrive. I'll just say that. So with that said, again, thank you, and we'll catch you next time.
No, we won't.
But before we do that...
Before we do, this has been so freaking long. It is time for the DCR lightning round, my friend.
It is.
All right, so the lightning round is very, very simple. I'm just going to ask you a few simple questions. I just want the first answer that comes to the top of your mind. I don't want you to filter it or anything. Just, I ask the question, you spit out the answer. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Anything goes.
Anything goes. Anything. Here we go. Jordan, what is your favorite color?
Red.
What is your favorite food on a rainy day?
Chili.
If you had a magic wand and you could do the soundscape for another book of your choice other than those listed tonight in this episode, which book would you soundscape?
Earthsea.
Ooh, great choice, great choice. And then finally, what is your stance on the 1983 sci-fi fantasy film Krull?
Have not heard of it.
Awesome. We can fix that. We can fix that readily. In fact, I heard there's an entire podcast about it. We'll have to talk about that some other time.
We may have had a special showing, too.
We may have. We may have shown it publicly. I don't know. Jordan, this
Sounds
was
like
such
I have something to do.
Yes. We're gonna add a punch to your nerd card. Jordan, thank you so very much for being on the show. You were awesome, and I cannot wait to dive face first into the body of work that you've produced for every nerd and geek everywhere who has been waiting for this kind of magic to happen. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much.
Daniel.
Well, I've already said we'll catch you
next time. Now you got to do it again because it wasn't. Do it again. Do it again.
We'll do it again. Anyways, folks, join. Go out there, collect as many copies of these amazing soundscapes as you can. Again, Jordan is being very generous with offering a 25% discount, and it's not just on one item; it's on the entire cart. He isn't limiting that to just one purchase, but definitely contribute to his dream. That's what any creative person wants. And like I said before, we'll catch you next time.
And dungeon crawlers, tell your story, whatever may come. And whether you are a dyed-in-the-wool Lord of the Rings fan, a Wheel of Time fanatic, or you're waiting for Jordan to finally score the Stinky Cheese Man, actual book, always remember to be epic and don't suck.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
What happens when modern magic, high-tech weaponry, and an unstoppable dragon collide? Find out in the epic audiobook of A Dragon's Fate, brought to life by Daniel and Krebs. This Whitney Award finalist novel will pull you into a pulse-pounding world where a secret cabal battles for power, and a dragon could bring everything to an explosive end. Don't just hear the story, feel the magic. the danger, and the action. Get ready for a ride you won't forget. Grab your copy of A Dragon's Fate, now available on Audible.